Hi there, it's Denise Eckert, and I love coming on here and sharing different ideas and techniques to help you lower the stress in your life. And today I've got Kat Amey. She's a life coach and retreat host, helping people to live a life that they love their own way. So, welcome, Kat.
Thank you, Denise. I'm excited to talk to you today.
Now, what inspired you to do this type of work?
Oh, big question. That's a good place to start. For me, it all really started on a journey that took me over to Thailand to a retreat center, which was about 9 years ago. And I won't tell you the full story because we will be here all day. But long story short, it actually ended up me moving there 7 years ago. Now I split my time between both. But my experience over there was working in a wellness retreat full time over in Phuket, Thailand. And it really opened my eyes to the world of well-being, the world of coaching, and just seeing how powerful it is having someone there to support you and essentially be your cheerleader. So going on that own journey myself, being a witness to that, but then generally like getting involved in it and experiencing life coaching myself, that just really drove me to retrain and essentially become a life coach to and I see so often people living a life that maybe doesn't feel aligned to really what they want their dreams to look like. And now I feel privileged every day that I get to help people do that.
Okay, now how does journaling come into this?
Yes. So journaling, personally for me, it has been a real positive way to curb my overthinking. And I see journaling as almost like your quiet friend. Sometimes when you've got a bit of a problem or an issue or something weighing on your mind, and perhaps you tell a family member or a friend, they answer back. They give you their views. Your journal doesn't do that. So it is there just to essentially empty perhaps some of those things that are going on in your mind. And you know how I use it in my coaching, because obviously I'm not speaking physically to my clients every single day. I encourage them to just ask themselves questions. And what we're trying to do is essentially get them to a place where they can coach themselves. And journaling is essentially that, asking yourself questions to find out the answers.
Now, for someone like myself that doesn't really like journaling, and I think it is because I don't like writing. Just I'm a little ADHD, not a little bit, but a lot. So I find that I can't write as fast as my brain works. Now, what is the solution for that?
Mm. So, for a solution for that particular challenge, I would suggest using journal prompts. Now, because one thing I often get the response when I say to people, do you journal? Have you tried journal? And it's, no, I don't know what to write. Like they're almost overwhelmed with the thought of what to write. And this idea also that it needs to be the right way. And certainly, if anyone's a bit of a perfectionist, we can lean into that. And actually, I encourage you to just say, okay, where can I start? I'm just going to ask myself one journal prompt. And that can be as simple as, how am I feeling today? And just seeing what comes out from your mind down onto paper. And from there, you can develop it into something a bit more. But that's a great place to start if you find that you're almost criticizing your journaling or your mind's just like almost so busy that you're trying to catch up with your writing. So using journal prompts is a great way to essentially get started with journaling.
Now, is it better to write by hand or can you use the computer or does that make a difference?
Um, it does make a bit of a difference, but I think it's very much based on what works for you. Because essentially, if we're putting a barrier in place, if we're saying we want to write it, but we don't have a journal, and actually, who nowadays, apart from if you're in some sort of job that needs writing, we rarely actually write. We rarely have that pen and paper essentially with us. Everything's so online now. So if you are someone who prefers to have an online record of it, then choose that instead. I personally love to write because I think just seeing myself write and those words physically coming from my brain down into my hand, sometimes it can shock me what comes out. But I would just say, try not to overthink it and just pick the easiest avenue for you.
Now, for someone that's listening and wants to start journaling, what are the tips that they can use to get started?
hmm Okay, awesome. So One of the tips I've already mentioned about is about keeping it easy and using journal prompts. And if you need any support with those, I'll share a bit at the end about how you can have access to a guide that I have to help you start journaling, which includes some journal prompts. But one positive thing that I really see works for people is tagging it on to another habit. And if any of your listeners have ever read James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, which has just been like a game changer for me, he's also on lots of podcasts. And he talks about this idea of habit stacking, which essentially is find a habit that you already do. So for me, it's like making my coffee in the morning. I use a French press, it's a nice, slow process. And so I do my journaling off the back of that. If anyone creates their coffee, creates their French press in the morning, you'll know you need to leave it for about 5 to 10 minutes to brew in order to get that flavor through. So that is exactly when I journal. So I make my coffee, grab my pen and my journal, and that's when I write. So this idea of habit stacking, all you're doing is stacking journaling onto a habit that you do every day. Now, obviously, that's not in the shower or driving because that's not safe. But perhaps there's a moment in your day when you know that you have a quiet 5 minutes, if that ever exists in our life. But for anyone who commutes to work, this is a perfect time, especially if you're in public transport, obviously, again, not driving, but using those little pockets of time that I'm going to say those times that you're probably scrolling on your phone or you're looking at social media or those times where you're just like, I don't know what I've done with the last 20 minutes, and actually use that time to journal instead. I guess that's my kind of like top tip on terms of if people are struggling, make it easy. Don't overthink what to write, use journal prompts and then tag it onto another habit. Once you've developed that habit, then you can change up whether it's the morning or the evening. But for right now, keep it super simple.
I love that. Now, do you recommend getting a journal book or just doing it on whatever piece of paper or?
I personally love a journal. I'm definitely someone who loves pretty stationery. And I think there's something about, for me, about being inspired to open that journal every day and actually write in it. And I've had everything from cheap lined notebooks, ring bound from the local supermarket to much more prettier stuff with perhaps my name embossed on the front. And I feel like it's definitely made a difference with something that feels like mine. And a lot of people will say to me, I'm a little bit nervous about writing certain stuff because I'm worried others may read it. Now, I think there's definitely something about something that really feels like yours and feels personal that creates more of that safety around your journal. It's like your private space. And I've always found that when it does feel like a nice piece of stationery, nice journal, and there are so many companies out there. Like I'm in the UK, so if anyone listening is in the UK, then hit me up for some suggestions. But there's so many journals now that are designed to make journaling easy. So again, if you're something you really want to do but struggling with it, then buy one of these journals that gives you journal prompts. That makes it super simple. And also you don't mind carrying around with you because that's when often you'll find those pockets of 5 minutes to journal.
And yeah, I'm going to ask you, is there a better time of day to journal? Is it better to do it in the morning? Or as you said, if you just have a little pocket of time,
Hmm.
what is more efficient when it comes to journaling?
I found, and it's something definitely I've experimented with my clients as well, is in terms of morning, if you have that pocket of time, that can be the best time. Now, I'm sure we all know that minute we turn on our phone or we load up our emails, it's like our brain suddenly just gets washed with all these distractions. And essentially, I'd like to call it as like we're opening ourselves up to the outside world, out to the noise. So if you're someone who wakes up and you turn on the news, all of a sudden you're filled with all these messages. But that moment when you wake up, you're much more in that calm, that relaxed state, and you're much more able to tap into the truth of what is going on up here. Morning has been shown to actually that's a better time for the kind of truthful thoughts to come out versus the ones that may be influenced by something you've just read or something you've seen on social media or something that maybe your partner said to you that morning that's I was feeling good about everything and now you've just said that and now you've annoyed me. So that sort of first thing in the morning, that's why for me I love to do it as a bit of a coffee ritual. But one thing I will add here is if you are someone who goes to bed and you struggle to fall asleep because your mind is overwhelmed and you're thinking about all these different things, then I would suggest maybe journaling before you go to bed. because that can just help to empty those thoughts and hopefully enable you to sleep a little bit better.
Now, for someone who's got a business, is this a technique that we can use for our business as well?
Absolutely. Especially if anyone is self-employed and works on their own, like myself, I can guarantee that you have those moments where you are literally doubting everything you're doing, right? Maybe a client has said no, or a challenge has come up in your business, and all of a sudden that mindset goes, "What am I doing? I need to go back to self-employed life," or "This feels challenging." And I definitely have those moments. And journaling for me has just been an amazing tool to come back and say, actually, what's the truth there? What actually is really true in this situation? Perhaps I faced a challenge in my business. I don't necessarily need to talk it out with a friend or a family member. I can coach myself around it. And for me, that's where journaling has really come in terms of my business to almost enable me to offload some of the things that, like when you're in an office and you've got your employees around there and something annoying happens, you have all those people to offload to. But when you're on your own, if you don't have that avenue around you, if you don't work with people perhaps in a co-working space, your journaling can almost be, like I said at the start there, your sort of silent friend, just to be like, this happened, this is how I'm feeling about it, and now I'm ready to move on.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you for that information because it's very difficult being in business on your own by yourself. And there's times where you second guess what you're doing, and it's just a way of getting things out. Now, prompt wise, what do you recommend people to use as prompts?
Obviously, we can go on the internet and you will find endless amount of prompts. One thing I would, as I mentioned earlier, about starting with just how am I feeling? Because I remember I said this to a client a few weeks ago. She came to one of my workshops here in the UK in person. And when she walked in, she was like all flustered and I could see that she'd been a bit rushed. And I said, "How are you feeling?" And she was like, "Oh, I don't know. I never asked myself that." She's got two teenage kids, runs a couple of businesses. So I think just giving ourselves permission to essentially take a moment to check in, that can be, it's such a simple question, but so powerful. And then off the back of that, for example, you said, actually, I'm feeling a bit tired and exhausted and frustrated. But then we can go a bit deeper of why am I feeling like that? What needs to change? What action do I want to take from that? So for me, that is, if anyone is literally just starting from day one in journaling, start with that question because it can open up a lot of doors. And naturally, you'll just start to then ask yourself more questions. So that's kind of one, start there with the prompts. If you're using journaling for a bigger reason or a very detailed reason of I really need to map out things with my business, for example, or there is a challenge in my life, then ask yourself questions around that. If it's this time of year, is perfect. The start of December, this time of year, it's great to ask yourselves those questions of what is my vision for 2025? What do I want to achieve? And most importantly, how am I going to get there? So asking yourselves detailed questions based on what you want to get from your journaling practice. But like I say, if it's just my brain overthinks and I want to start, then start with that question, how am I feeling?
That sounds great. Now, I understand you do have a workbook that you offer to people. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, of course. A couple of years ago, a lot of people were coming back and saying, journaling sounds like a good idea. Oh, I hear why you do it. I see the reasons for it, but it was a lot of the things you've asked me today, like how, why, what, how do I get started? So I've got a really simple, it's just a few pages, downloadable workbook that essentially guides you through how to get started. And then it also just ends with some journal prompts as well to essentially start that habit. I'll also share in there my favorite stationery company that are in the UK. But like I say, I'm sure if you're listening from anywhere in the world, there are lots of beautiful stationery companies. But yeah, if that guide is useful for you, if journaling is something that's of interest to you, then I'll share the link with you, Denise, and they can download that for free.
Wonderful. And now, how can we use journaling for goal setting?
Mm. So perfect time of year, right?
Yeah.
Looking us towards next year. So I think, especially in January, what I see so often is people getting lost in this idea that there is going to be this magic goal, this magic way of, we get lost in those New Year's resolutions. Sorry, but I'm not a big fan. I think science shows how quickly they essentially we give up on those New Year's resolutions. So instead of looking at, okay, what's the magic answer? What's the big one thing and feeling this pressure, actually using journaling as a way of setting your goals and looking forward to next year can be something that feels a bit more softer, something that is not, oh my God, I've got to reach this goal, otherwise I'm going to be like a failure, for example. So asking yourselves questions that feel a bit more into your, they get into a bit more into your feelings versus the actual goal itself. So how do I want to feel at the end of the year? What do I want to say I've achieved? Most importantly, how am I going to feel when I've achieved that? So asking those questions that aren't rigid, goal orientated, how much am I going to earn, or how many clients am I going to have in my business? Actually, what if I achieve what I want to achieve? What type of person is that going to enable me to be? So broadening that question and less about a rigid business strategy. As again, especially when you work on your own, when you're self-employed, we know that we've got to be invested, right? We've got to be, because there are times when we're just like, oh, be easier to just get a check at the end of the month. No, you've got to really want to be in that business and you've got to really understand your why. So I would say use, especially at this time, it just help to craft your vision for 2025. And you can really use journaling as a way to do that.
I love that because you are focusing on how you want to feel rather than, as you said, like the structured business goals that I don't know. I find I've moved away from them a lot. It's in the past, I worked for corporations where it was just so money oriented. It was all about money.
Yeah, of course it was.
And now I'm self-employed. It's really not about money all the time.
Mm,
It's how we want to live our lives and the freedom that the self-employment gives us. And that's really important to keep going because a lot of times things do get hard.
mm.
But so basically, if you're writing these things down, it's also something you can look back on too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And people often ask me, do you read back on your journals? And yes, it's actually something I don't necessarily read every page because I would be there a long time. But there are certain dates. I try to start a new journal at the beginning of every year. And there's certain times where I will just flick through my journal and certain things will pop out. Wow, I said I wanted that, or I said I was feeling that way, and I'm not anymore. And that can just be a really nice way to reflect and actually do some reflective journaling. This is how I felt last year, or this is what I said I wanted to achieve this year. And I said I wanted to create more freedom in my business. And I said I wanted to feel excited about my business versus I said I wanted to have this amount of clients. I said I wanted to have this amount of income. Because as soon as we say that, often it can come with this feeling of like pressure and rush and challenge. Whereas actually, okay, if I get that amount of clients, how am I going to feel? What is that going to enable? Is that going to give me the freedom that I'm after? We can go a little bit deeper than, like you say, corporate goals that are like just focus on figures, essentially.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to be wrapping this up. Now, what are the last words of wisdom from Kat that you're going to share with the audience today?
Mm, make it fun. I think a lot of these practices, again, let's go back to New Year's resolutions, is I see people talking about, I'm doing this, and it's they're almost dreading the thing that they've just signed up for. And like any of these wellness practices, whether it's yoga, whether it's some sort of like fitness or whether mindfulness, meditation, honestly, if it's not fun, don't do it. Or adapt it, make it easy and make it fun, because otherwise that habit isn't going to stick. And you have an opportunity here to make things fun in your life. So don't add something else that you hate doing.
Then it becomes stressful, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we don't want that. That's the opposite of what this is meant to do. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kat. Great information. You know what? I'm going to give journaling another stab. I just find that it's one of those things that I'll start it, then I'll stop, and I'll start it, and I'll stop. And I know it's great for brain dumping, and I do use it for that when you've got way too much going on and you just need to get your mind cleared again, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you so much for your time today. Great information and just giving you a gentle reminder to slow down and enjoy life. And I'll see you in the next episode.